Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is analyze. Let's take a moment to look at some of the definitions or the ways that we use this verb. The first way you might hear analyze used is to mean to examine something in great detail in order to explain or interpret it. So, in this first definition, which is certainly the most common way this verb gets used, many times we're looking at information or data. That's the something that we begin to look through and kind of consider, think about what all of this information might mean in order to maybe explain why something happened, or maybe we'll use that information to think about what is going to happen in the future. The second definition of this verb is very much connected, so that's to discover or reveal something through this detailed examination. Analyze is a common verb that many teachers will use with their students. They might ask them to read certain books, articles, stories, and examine it, or even examine passages, maybe analyzing a collection of articles or texts in order to better understand or explain certain ideas. Our third definition of the verb analyze is connected to psychology. So, unless you work in this field, you might not be as likely to hear this meaning used. So, our third definition is to examine or treat a person and or their behavior using a system of psychological theory and therapy. So kind of helping someone understand maybe why they feel a certain way, why they're acting a certain way, and what some other ways might be that could be a little healthier or produce better results for themselves. A fourth way the verb analyze gets used is connected to the area of chemistry. So, this is many times when a scientist or researcher is identifying and measuring the different chemicals that make up something. You should know the verb analyze is a regular verb. To make the progressive form of this verb, you're going to drop the E on the end because we have our Y is making a vowel sound here. We have a vowel, a consonant, and then an E. So we're dropping the E before we add ing, and that makes analyzing. The past tense and participle forms of this verb can be made by just adding D since this verb already ends in an E. Our base verb, analyze, ends in a voiced Z sound. This means that the past tense ending is just going to make a D sound. So it should sound like this: analyzed, analyzed. Now, you might be happy to know we don't have any phrasal verbs for us to discuss today. So instead, we're going to move on and practice using our verb of the day in a couple different verb tenses. Today, we'll practice the imperative and the present perfect progressive. Let's start with the imperative. The imperative is another way to say a command. Okay? Here, we're telling a person to do a particular action. We're not asking them, can you do this, right? We're not giving them advice and saying you should do this, right? We're going to tell them, do this. So the imperative is rather unique in English. Many times my students and we get used to this pattern of starting with a subject and then making our verb. But with the imperative, we're just going to begin the sentence with the verb. And that's because the subject is implied, which means we understand what is meant without having to say it. So the subject is always you, being one person or you being two or more people. It depends whom we are communicating to. So, to begin a positive or affirmative sentence, I can just start my sentence with the base verb. You can see that in the example. Analyze these texts' treatment of women and then respond to the questions below. This sounds like a command from a teacher who's asking their students to read certain passages, right? Examine and think about how are they treating women, right? And then eventually they'll answer questions below. Now, if you want to make a negative imperative sentence, right, we can start with do not and then the base verb. You might hear the contraction, like in my example, don't analyze me. Right? You might hear someone give this command to you if they feel like, kind of tying back to that third definition, you're trying to examine their behavior from a psychological point of view. And so they might not find that helpful, especially if you are not a trained psychologist, therapist, or counselor. Now, there aren't any questions in the imperative. Again, we're just telling people what to do. One last note on the imperative. Some students feel like this can be a little rude to just tell someone what to do. So you can add please to the beginning of a positive or a negative sentence. You could put please at the end, but one please is just fine in a sentence. Now let's move on and talk about the present perfect progressive. We use this verb tense to talk about an action that started in the past and is continuing into the present. This action may even continue into the future. Now, some teachers and some textbooks will call this the present perfect continuous, and that's just fine. The reason I like saying present perfect progressive is I want my students to see the 3 P's in the name present perfect progressive and remember they're going to need 3 parts to make their verb. So in the affirmative, we're going to start with our subject. If the subject is I, you, we, or they, I'm going to use have, then the participle been, B-E-E-N, and then the ing form the verb. If the subject is he, she, or it, I'm going to use has been and then the ing form of the verb. So those are my 3 parts to my verb. You can see that in my example sentence. Researchers have been analyzing fragments of a meteor believed to be from another solar system. This might tie back to that 4th definition of our verb, where we're kind of talking about chemically what is making something up, right? They want to know what's inside of this meteor. Now let's talk about making negative present perfect progressive sentences. To do this, again, we always start with our subject. We're going to use has or have, depending on what our subject is, then not, then the participle been, and then the ing form of the verb. It's pretty common to hear people combine have not into one word, haven't, or has not into the contraction hasn't. You can see that in my example here. He hasn't been analyzing cash flow statements to make investment decisions. Right? So he's not reviewing all of this different information before making a decision. Now let's look at making a yes or no question in the present perfect progressive. To do this, you start with have or has, you use your subject, then the participle been, and then the ing form of the verb. Here's my last example. Have you been analyzing this data to look for trends that could help us make better decisions? So maybe this is a question a supervisor, a manager is asking an employee. Okay? I want to know, have you started doing this action? Are you still doing it as we are speaking or as we are communicating? Now, let's spend a little time looking at some words that are related to our verb analyze. And the first word we're going to talk about is the noun form of this word, analysis. Sorry, a little moment there. Analysis. So analysis can be detailed examination of the elements or the structure of something. We can get into those more detailed definitions that connect to psychology or to chemistry, but I think it's more common for you just to hear kind of this more basic usage. So, an example of this noun in a sentence might be, we focused our analysis on survey responses collected. Okay, so here we're saying we examined in detail the different responses that have been collected. Another related word that you might hear is the noun analytics. Analytics. This is a really growing area of jobs right now. So you might realize that tech companies are collecting all sorts of data, right? YouTube is doing this, even as you watch these videos. And then someone has to go about reviewing this information, thinking about what does this mean. So analytics is the systematic computational analysis of data or statistics. So generally, this is going to be a large quantity of information. So an example of how you might hear this used. More and more professional sports teams are using analytics to make trades. So where they're talking to one team and saying, we want this player and we'll give you that player, that's what that sentence is referring to. This is really used now in every industry, every field. Another related word you might hear is the adjective analytical. This adjective means something is relating to or using analysis or logical reasoning. An example of this in a sentence might be, the company wants to hire analytical people who can help solve problems. Right? So this is describing someone who just doesn't do exactly what they're told to do, but might be thinking more deeply. How could we make this better? What's a way to figure something out? Right? So this adjective or this quality is seen as quite desirable in many occupations and or many careers. The last related word we're going to talk about today is the noun analyst. Analyst. This is a person who conducts analysis. Okay. And we might see this as part of a job title in a number of different industries. So, an example of this in a sentence might be, top Wall Street analysts say these stocks will have large dividends, right? So they're going to pay out earnings from the company profits. Thank you so much for watching today's video. I hope you have a great day.